Hello and welcome to another Cinema 4D tutorial. My name is Ricardo Silva. Today I'm going to be doing a follow-up tutorial for the polygon brush, but at the same time I am going to do some modeling of the Superman logo. To do a model, it's a good idea to have a reference. So what I'm going to be doing in this tutorial is that I am going to select the front isometric view. So I can go ahead into the options and the option to configure this view. By doing that, my parameters show up down here at the bottom right of the interface, and I go to the back tab of the viewport, the front viewport. In the image parameter, I simply click on the three little buttons that I have on the right side, and I will load up the reference image that I want to use, and this is the one. So I'm going to open it, and it will pop out and show up in my front view. Now I can go to the transparency option and maybe increase this to a point where I can see the image, but at the same time I can see what I am doing in my modeling. Now this image is very dark, and you will see that I will probably need this information later, the one that is really inside of the model later. But at this moment, I'm going to increase this to a point that I only see that image very lightly. So maybe like an 80 or 85% would be perfect. I'm going to make it 80 so you guys can see it a little better there. Now, if you haven't watched the Polygon Pen tutorial, I strongly recommend that you do that. I should have it in my website. And to go to that Polygon Pen, I just go to the Mesh option or the Mesh menu, Create Tools, and Polygon Pen. The reason why I'm going to be using the Polygon Pen is because I'm going to have to create a lot of polygons that are basically the front face of this logo. Therefore, I'm going to be using a tool that's going to help me do that really efficiently and quickly. So I go to the actual polygon face mode, and then my polygon brush gets enabled, and I can adjust the brush size or radius by going here. I'm going to maybe make it 15 centimeters, which is more or less the thickness of that polygon there. Maybe a little lower, maybe like 10 or 12, something like that. Yeah, that would be just fine. Okay. So what I'm going to do is basically draw really quickly this set of polygons over here, and then with my shift key continue adding polygons until I get to this point. Adjust some of these sizes and directions. I can get closer if I need to. And of course, because I was drawing with my brush, I don't necessarily have a perfect angle of drawing this. So I have to manually make sure that all these points are located in the right place, as I am doing here, something like that. Perfect. So the modeling process usually is a very tedious process, especially if you're going to do polygonal modeling like this one. You're going to have to sacrifice your time doing a lot of adjustments, just like what I'm doing here. You want to create a model that is as close to the image reference as possible and maintain the integrity of the shape, of course. So that's what I'm trying to achieve in here. And also thinking about how I am going to subdivide this mesh later on, so it actually is going to be a faithful model, and the topology should be very good as well. Now that I have something like that, I can increase, well, actually I can press the shift key, and from here I can pull those polygons up to here maybe, so I can modify this. Okay. Make sure that I have that nicely laid out, and I'm going to continue with my shift key and adding more of these polygons all the way down to there. Okay, so the idea is that I am going to create all of these polygons, the shape of this logo, in a way that I'm going to take my time and make sure that it's perfect. So in some cases here during the tutorial that I'm going to present to you here, I may be fast forwarding the process because you probably don't want to see me do all these tweaks since you already know what I am doing anyway. So if you see that the video is forwarding, is going forward, then that's because I don't want you to get bored. I am making sure that the polygons, they actually touch precisely the area in which they are going to be subdivided. So in this case, for example, here, I make sure that that point falls exactly in that corner, because I'm gonna need some polygons in there to do that. And with my point tool, with my point mode in the polygon pen tool, I can add cuts very easily. Okay, so that's more or less what I'm trying to achieve in here, is that sort of that kind of geometry that is going to help me. As you can see here, I added a little gap in there, and that is because I know that I am going to add a row of polygons that it will continue on this area as well. So I'm just leaving room for that in there and adjust my polygons accordingly. Now that I created the main shape, I realized that I probably want to have some sort of a gap in here, so I can add a row of polygons that will actually eventually be this area over here, and of course continue to add more of these polygons. Okay, like so. And in the particular case of this area, sometimes adding polygons like that is going to be a little complicated. It's not that easy. You cannot simply draw the polygons. So I'm going to use my control key to basically add some of these edges that I need to add like that. So I'm extruding the points so I can easily add that curvature that otherwise would be a little hard. So just making sure that I have my square polygons in there. Now that I'm like that, I can press my control key and click so I can get rid of that and extrude these edges instead. Okay, so I use all the necessary tools to get the job done in here, and that it looks the way that I want to look like. Okay, so I got some nice topology there, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing here. So I extrude, well, I can actually do the extrusion of the points in here very easily. Okay, very easily and very quickly. Okay, maybe in here I need some subdivision, so I just go to the point mode and I do my specific cuts very easily as well. Try to get the shape that I want. In this case, I don't need that, but I will need an extruded edge in there. Okay, and another one over here. If I press the Shift key when I'm extruding an edge, I can actually orient that edge in the direction that I want. Of course, I'm gonna need that to be going like so. And then I can do this type of extrusion of my points really quickly as well. Something like that. And get rid of that. And get rid of that. And simply extrude this edge to go there. There you go. Perfect. So that's how I'm doing this, and I'm going to continue doing that for the rest of this area. So I'm going to forward really quickly. In this area that is really thin, I'm going to use the quad strip mode. I'm not going to use end guns, and I'm going to use the edge mode, meaning that I can draw an edge really thin, small there, but whenever I draw another edge, it creates a square or a quadrangle, and very quickly I can maintain the same proportion in length of my polygons, but they are really thin. So really quickly, I just add all these elements like so. Okay, so now the next step is to add this curvature that if I go back to my configure element in here and I lower that opacity, I can see that the logo actually goes towards the inside, but it goes towards the inside in a very how would I say it? It starts from the front plane, and then eventually, little by little, it goes down all the way to the back, and it becomes the side of the top area here of the S. So we need a guide or something that will help us create that perfectly fine. So what I'm going to try to do in this case, I'm going to create a plane that is going to be the z-axis, okay, and I'm going to make that turning a little bit, more or less, in the direction that I want this to turn. So I'm going to put it right something like that, okay? So that would be perfect. I'm going to disable the polygon that I created, which is all those front faces. And I'm going to be using the snap, enable snap. Make sure that I am in 3D snapping instead of auto, because when you are working on a front or isometric view, the snapping is by default automatically a 2D snapping. That's why I have to force this to be a 3D snapping option. Okay. Now I'm going to snap, not in the vertex map, okay, but I'm going to snap into the, let's say, polygon. Where is it? Polygon snap. Okay, perfect. So whenever if I go to my spline and I look for Bezier, and if I draw this type of curve that in here I need to see without the grid, so it's a much clearer, okay, something like that, and then in here and so on, like so, I should be drawing on top of the polygon that I created. So I'm creating that curve, okay, but it's being snapped to that polygon that I made that basically my working plane, my temporary working plane. So if I remove that and I enable my polygons, now I can see that indeed I created that curve really straight without the problem of trying to make it that way, okay? So that's the idea that I have right now. In here, in the front view, I'm going to go to the options, and but before I do that, because I know that these points over here, this one and these other ones, they should be all the way back here, in the same level as that. So I'm going to resize that to be something like so, and make sure that it's nice and flat like so. Perfect. So now I can easily go with my options and configure, lower, increase the transparency to something that I am able to see what I'm working on. Go back to my polygons and go back to my polygon pen. In this case, I'm going to be using the enable snap in 3D, which is okay. And I'm going to snap to spline snap. I don't need the polygon snap anymore. So now I can go in here and I can press my control key and snap to the spline. So the point that I'm extruding right now with the polygon pen is actually snapping to the spline. And you can tell that it is doing that because it says spline snap. So that's good. And I continue doing the same thing to the other points. Okay, so now I know that it is actually going, snapping, extruding, and little by little is following that curve that I created precisely to do this type of distortion of my mesh. So I can do that. In here it's going to get a little tighter in the curve, but that's okay because that's exactly what is supposed to happen. Okay. So now, even though I'm looking through the front and I do have 3D snapping enabled, that is the one that is going to guarantee me that this snapping, even though I am looking at it from a 2D perspective, it is actually moving in 3D space and snapping to the spline, which is behind the plane of the points that I'm extruding right now. So when I'm ready to finish, which I'm not yet, I will stop there. Now this one is going to be a problematic because it has a triangle, so I'm going to command and click so I can get rid of that, and I just move this guy forward. Okay. Now that I achieved that, I look at it from the perspective and see exactly what I did. So this is exactly what my intention was when I was creating that curve, to be able to manipulate my object in such a way that it's going to be an easy way to create that curve or change in planes of my polygons. And of course, down here on the beginning, I have a triangle, so I'm going to press my Control and click to get rid of that and extrude this edge so it gets welded to this guy over here, and that should do it perfectly fine. Now that I have the main shape like that, I'm going to be doing now the following shape that is down here. That one doesn't need any snapping or anything like that in the creation of the spline, but I'm going to have to increase once again or lower the transparency so I can see what shape I'm trying to draw in here. Now that I have that shape precisely done, then I will have to move that shape with my move tool back, probably as much as all the way as the rest of the other polygons that I moved back a minute ago. So now that I have that, I'm going to go back to my polygon object, go back to my polygon pen, go to my points mode and make sure that I will enable snap and double check that I am in the spline snap as well. So by doing that, I can start with my Control key extruding every single point until it reaches that point. Now if I look at it in my 3D view, I can see exactly what I did. And I can see that something went wrong here, which is fine. I can still move that point. And I know it's this one over here. Make sure that it snaps. And I have it there. Okay, so I'm going to disable those guys. I don't need them anymore. I'm going to disable my snap. I don't need that anymore. And now I'm ready to continue with the extrusion of those elements. Those additional edges that were not extruded, they can be actually being selected with my selection tool. So I go to my path selection, and I am going to choose the simple edge loop, which selects that. Oh, I'm going to have to go to edges. I'm sorry, edges, and these edges, and these edges. Okay, so I'm going to extrude those by selecting my selection tool and control dragging until I match the depth of these other guys over here. And now I have my object, something like that. And this extruded or this non-extruded edge that I didn't extrude in here, I simply use the bridge tool to go from here to there, and now everything is perfectly fine in there. Of course, I still have some problems in here, which I didn't extrude this area, which I should probably do at one moment or another to make sure that I have geometry there. So I'm going to use my path selection tool here, and I'm going to select without the add to selection. So I'm going to select all of these points, maybe up to the point where I got it somewhere in there. Okay, something like that, probably. Okay, and do exactly the same thing with my selection tool and control drag. I'm going to make sure that they are in a perfect straight line, so I decrease the size to be 0. There you go. And move it to the actual position of the rest of the polygons. Okay, somewhere in there. And now I'm going to have to work with how to fix these areas, because I have an extra element in there. So that shouldn't be too much of a problem. In here, I'm going to add another bridge union. Okay. And over here, I probably would have to, let's say, maybe get rid of this edge in here. And I probably would have to do some sliding of points. So I'm going to press the M and the letter O for slide. So I can go to the point mode and slide some of these points back like so. So I can rearrange my geometry. Okay. So eventually I will have all this geometry flat. So now I can use my normal move tool and go something like so. All right. So what I'm trying to do is basically get rid of that extra edge that I had in there, but remain with quads at the same time. Okay. So now that I have more or less created that, I will have to flatten all those edges. So I'm going to press my UL for loop selection, which it does a nice loop selection there. Another loop selection here, another one over here. Let me see, there you go. And of course the one on the outside, the one on the inside on these little triangles. Okay, so I have all those edges or points together. Now I can manipulate that to be at 0. There you go. So now I make sure that they are all flat, and I can convert that into a convert selection from points to edges. Okay, and I'm just going to do a little tiny extrusion on those. Okay, and now from here on, basically I have to close these polygons in the back. You can see the full production of this logo in a time-lapse video that I created, and it's posted on the web as well. So until next time, have a great day. Bye-bye.